If you're thinking about renovating your kitchen, one of the most important parts is the countertop. Today, I'll discuss the available types to help you make an informed choice. Let's begin. As many of you know, on the Decorate It Yourself channel, we are renovating a flat and well, I'm going to have to change the kitchen. So I visited multiple stores to learn about kitchens, countertops, and so on. And it turns out that countertops are a whole world, and there are many things to know about them. So with all the information I've been able to gather, I've made this video to talk to you about everything about them. The first one would be the agglomerated countertop. You will know it well. It's exactly the one we put in our house. There are various types of agglomerated countertops, which I will discuss now. But the main characteristic of all agglomerated countertops is that they have pressed wood inside and on the outside. Well, they have a layer. Let's say it would protect the inside part, which is the part that has more problems with humidity. It can puff up and so on. The agglomerated countertop comes in various textured effects, such as natural stone, marble, concrete, ceramic, and slate. Then we have the wood imitation agglomerates, like it could be oak, pine, tile. And finally, the solid agglomerates, like it could be the steel whites, melamine, pink, grey, stone. The main advantage of this countertop, and why we chose it, is its low cost. It's a very economical countertop. In fact, it cost us 200 euros in our house. And we covered the entire top part of the kitchen, the side part of the fridge. We also created a waterfall area, which is the part that descends on the peninsula. There were many meters of countertop here, and if we had chosen another material, we probably would have spent a fortune. With the agglomerated countertop, we only paid around 200 euros. So we could say that its main advantage is this, that it is very economical. Another great advantage, apart from its cost, would be the fact that it can be installed very easily and simply. In fact, if we have to make a hole to install our dishwasher, we would simply have to cut it with a saw and then we could install it. The installation method is very simple, the cutting method is very easy, and it really makes our life much easier to install this type of countertops. We can bring it ourselves with our van. Of course, if it's big, a car wouldn't work. But we could also rent it and transport it. That's how we did it. And it's really very simple to work with them. But of course, it has some disadvantages that we could also say are important compared to other countertops, which would be their durability. I have to say that I am quite happy with our countertop. It's been 2 or 3 years since we installed it, and it has really performed well. But it is true that sometimes we have slipped with a knife and cut the countertop a bit. This, for example, wouldn't happen with a porcelain countertop or with a silestone, but with the particle board one, it does. The texture that comes on the top, well, it gets scratched, and that, well, stays forever. I mean, it's very annoying because then you're cooking and you see the cut you made one day that you missed or decided not to use a piece of wood to avoid cutting it. You see it and it annoys you. So it's a disadvantage, let's put it that way. The next one would be that you can't put anything hot or very, very, very hot on top of it. It's true that this would be a drawback, but sometimes I've lost my mind and I've put a hot pot right on the countertop. And nothing happened to it. For now, all that's left is for it to happen, like when I caught it. But for now, it has held up very well. I've put things, dishes, and hot stuff, and so far it's holding up. So this is a drawback, but personally it hasn't happened to me. And the next thing would be the fact that it can puff up. In fact, if we have some piece that has not been well covered with silicone when putting the dishwasher or any area where the agglomerated part is exposed. Of course, if water gets in, it could puff up. We could solve this in a simple way. We did this in our bathroom. I saw it in a video and I think it's a great idea. And it's to take silicone that is special for sinks and kitchens and we put it all over the particle board. That is, we make our cut and there we would put, the silicone. And this would prevent, the water from eventually seeping in and the wood from swelling and blistering. So this disadvantage could have a solution. As for the wood, we have the wood effect chipboard, but we also have the wood itself. Let's say the wood cut that we could use, the board that we could use, as a countertop. This has some advantages, especially that it is economical. It would be a bit like particle board. It has a similar price, we could say, or even a little cheaper. But it's true that we have some disadvantages that particle board doesn't have, such as the fact that it needs to be treated over time. In fact, in the larger sink in this big one, we have a wooden countertop, and we haven't treated it over time. But it is true that there are areas that have swelled a bit from being in contact with water for so long. We had a leaking faucet that caused the surrounding area to swell a bit due to the constant dripping. So with the water issue, could we have some complications if something like this happened to us, like a drip, some water loss, some water leak? And then also over time, if it wears out or something similar, we would have to give it some final finish or give it back over time. Therefore, as an advantage, we could highlight the price, and as a disadvantage, we could say the humidity and that it does not withstand heat as much, right? Which would be a bit like the agglomerate. We also couldn't put things that were super boiling there because we would probably end up burning it. We now move on to natural stone countertops, which would be granite, marble, and silestone. Granite countertops are well known because many people have this type of countertop. And the truth is that I like it. I think it's a countertop that can look very nice. But it's true that we are very limited in terms of choice. Precisely because it is a natural stone, it has a series of advantages that others do not have, such as resistance. It is very, very, very resistant and durable. You can place very hot things without having to worry. In fact, my mother and grandmother have these countertops. They withstand everything and have been around for years. You can put boiling things on them and they handle it all. But it is true that in style, it might seem a little bit more old-fashioned. Now, there is much more variety than before, but even so, it is more limited than other types of countertops. Another advantage that we have not mentioned and that I also think is worth highlighting is that as time goes by, if it loses some shine, we just need to polish it. I guess you have to hire it. I'm not sure about this. Or do they sell some machine that you can do it yourself? But the fact is that if you polish it, it looks very nice and regains that shine it had at the beginning. Finally, another disadvantage we would find, apart from the smaller variety of colors we have available, would also be the price. It's true that it depends on the granite we choose. If we go for a granite that is made here, it will probably be much more economical. If we look for a granite, well, more spectacular, more different. Or from who knows where it is, of course, this will increase the price, and logically it won't cost us 200 euros like the agglomerate. As for marble, another natural stone. The main disadvantage is that it is very vulnerable to certain aggressive or cleaning products, in this case, especially everything that has to do with stains. However, if it loses its shine, it would be a bit like granite. We could polish it and restore the original shine it had at the beginning. When we buy it, it has the great advantage that we can place boiling things on it, and we are not going to give it a knife cut and leave a mark. But it is true that you have to be a little careful when using certain cleaning products. Let's go for the silestone countertops. Silestone countertops are mostly composed of compacted natural quartz with resins, among other materials. This means that it has a series of advantages and disadvantages like the others. The main advantage, and perhaps the most striking, is that you can achieve any type of finish. There are silestone countertops of all colors, of all designs, of all. Let's go. Here, the variety is infinite. We could get almost anything. Another great advantage related to the design would be that on the spine part, let's say, of the countertop, we could get the same design that we have on the top part. That this, for example, we could not have if it were porcelain. For example, silestone countertops are very hard and resistant. In other words, we won't have the added problem of accidentally cutting it with a knife. However, these have a disadvantage that the other stones do not have. Let's say it would be the fact that they don't withstand heat as well. Roughness or even deformations could occur on the surfaces if we place things with a temperature above 100 degrees. As for porcelain countertops, they are a great solution when choosing. These types of countertops are made of porcelain, which is much more resistant than the typical conventional stoneware. The main advantage is that it is a material that is not porous and therefore tolerates stains very well. It is incredibly easy to clean, and in this sense it is very comfortable. Unlike silestone, it tolerates heat very well, and we can place anything on top without that fear that it will deform or wrinkle. We find a disadvantage, and it would be the fragility at certain points of the porcelain. In this case, above all, I'm talking about the part of the sink. We find different types of sinks on the market, like the typical one could be that we place on top and put the silicone underneath so that it sticks well. And then the one that is embedded, which goes from bottom to top. I didn't know any such example of embedded. I didn't know anyone who had it until my cousin put it on relatively recently. And the truth is that when I went to his house, he told me that it had come loose and then, well, it fell off the sink, let's say. Since then, well, I've kind of developed a bit of a fear of these types of sinks, right? That it goes like stuck from below. They had to put a beam from below and that's it. Let's say there are solutions, but it is true that, well, it's a bit scary, right? That your sink comes loose. So one of the disadvantages of putting the porcelain is that if we want an embedded sink, probably if we hit it with a plate, with a glass, with whatever, then a piece of porcelain could chip off. And then, well, we see a hole there. If we find that piece and manage to glue it with Loctite, it would be perfect. But of course, if we don't find it, then we'll be left with that hole forever, I suppose, until we change the countertop again. Another disadvantage that we could find, which it would also share with stones, is the fact that it's more expensive than particle board, right? Of course, it's also better, but it's quite a bit more expensive. If we wanted to cover an entire kitchen, say 3 or 4 meters of countertop, plus a small backsplash on top, we could be reaching 2,500 to 3,000 euros. Perfectly. As for synthetic countertops, such as Korean, Neolith or stainless steel, these types of countertops offer us durability and design. And for example, in the case of Korean, the joints are much more concealed. However, the main disadvantages we find are that it could scratch more easily and the heat resistance, which is also lower. Would it be a bit like silestone, in this case with the heat? Stainless steel countertops, which were previously used more for industrial kitchens and the like, are now increasingly being brought into everyday, so to speak, lifelong kitchens. They fit well in an industrial style, for example. These countertops are super resistant, both in terms of durability and heat issues. Finally, let's discuss microcement, which I've repeatedly expressed enthusiasm for using in a project. There's less time to do it, as I already have some little things. You'll see, right? But another option that we could consider when making a countertop would be microcement, and in this case we could apply microcement. Well, to some insulating plates. For example, place the insulating plate. Above all, be very careful with the issue of corners. They should be well metallized so that you can't hit it and break it. And once we have the structure of the countertop, so to speak, well, we could place our microcement. The main advantage of microcement would be that we could apply it ourselves. We can choose many colors, and it's quite more economical than other types of materials. But as a disadvantage, we could say, well, that it can be scratched depending on what we cut on it. Well, we could end up scratching it. One thing we can do is that when we already have several scratches, and this of course we can't do on the agglomerate they would stay and that's it. But in the case of microcement, once we had them or had several, we could sand the entire surface and reapply the microcement again. And the truth is that it would be practically new again, the countertop. So I think it's a very good option. And we have to do little things and try some kind of countertop of this style. And well, guys, here are all types of countertop. I hope you found it useful and we'll see you very soon in upcoming videos. See you soon. Thank you.